Hello, and welcome to the Manitoba School Boards Association webinar, Snapshot on the Governance Core, Part 1. My name is Janice Arnold, Board Development Consultant here at the Association. I hope that you can all hear me, that you took a moment when the music was on to adjust your volume on your computer, and you can follow along. So first things first, if you are listening to this as a recording, the original air date was February 26, 2020. And with the recording, there aren't any live questions, but please contact the association if you have questions after you do watch. For questions during the webinar and at any time during the webinar, for those participants, look over on the left side of your screen at the bottom, and there's a window called Q&A. At the bottom of that window, there's a horizontal scroll bar, and you can type your question in there at any time, and I will address them all verbally, but at the end. As well, you can hear me, but I can't hear you, and neither can anyone else on the webinar. We do have a couple of groups that are listening as from the division office as a whole, so that's partly why we keep the sound muted. Or for any of you that have your barking dogs in the background, we keep the noise down. Also, others, they can't see the question that you type or who is posing the question, so please feel free to throw up anything that you like there, and I'll answer that at the end. This series of webinars is a little different from the previous ones. Like me, you may have been hearing a lot over the past year about the book, The Governance Core. So with the interest shown in it, I thought I'd present this a little bit more like a book review. And we're going to take a look at some of the areas that I found particularly interesting or that I thought might be helpful to you and your board. So the changes from my usual webinar are going to be that instead of having some additional resources that I offer at the end, since this is about a book, The Governance Core, I'll just say that the book is the resource. If you'd like to, if you like some of the ideas that you hear over this 3-part series, you might consider purchasing it, and I know you can order it online or through some bookstores. So this brings to mind the professional development that some boards did where they took the modules in this in the Leadership for Student Learning, or as perhaps it's better known, the Lighthouse Study. Boards have worked through each of the modules. If your board like that and is looking for something new, this book might give you some ideas that you can do, although it's not set out with the modules or the questions and discussion topics. It's more of a narrative, so maybe you'll have to work in making up your sessions on your own. Okay, and the second part the second change that I'm making from my usual webinars, that I usually run a poll. I'm looking at people's experiences that are online or their plans, or to see the demographic of who's tuning in. In this 3-part series, because it's just quick snapshots of some ideas presented in the governance core, we're instead going to go straight into those and just run through them. So let's get right into it. I'm just going to bring up my webcam, and the presentation just should be coming up at the same time. Hi there. You can see I'm sitting in my sunny office here. So snapshot on the governance core. In this series of webinars, we're taking 3 snapshots of the governance core written by Davis Campbell and Michael Fullan. They published this book in 2019, and I, along with a number of school trustees, feel it bears looking at for 2 reasons. It lays out the job of a school trustee and boards as it specifically relates to governance in a clear, concise, and I think directive manner. It is very much, I guess, hands-on and shows the importance of governance to the success of school divisions. And secondly, it is so timely and current, I thought. It deals with many of the day-to-day issues and the concerns that boards are having to address right now. While it points out some of the fundamental changes boards need to make and you can take that time and possibly maybe it's a big commitment to change. If you don't want to tackle that right away, it also offers some immediate and simple fixes so you can get started even today. I hope over this series of webinars, you'll see yourselves and your board in some capacity. And if you don't need to make any specific shifts, then at least use the webinars as an assessment tool to feel secure that you know that you are on the right path. Okay, you'll see up there on the screen, and let's set the scene. Let's imagine you're in a melee of a midway at a traveling fair or festival. You're in line for the Ferris wheel with your best friend. You're laughing, enjoying popcorn and candy floss. You're looking around and watching some of the crowd. Someone throws a baseball and wins a teddy bear. Two preteens, maybe they high five each other. A little girl is standing wide eyed and with a smile at a clown who's walking by. The line moves quickly, and you friend, you take your seats. It's a great day, life is good. The wheel starts to carry you up, but at the top, it stops. We all know that happens, but you're pretty happy about that because now you get a bird's eye view of the whole scene. Oh, let's go. There's my scene. I forgot to click over there. I hope you can take a look at that now. Looks pretty good and everybody is happy. But let's go a little bit further. You're up at the top and you're looking down after seeing all those things nice that were around you when you're in the lineup. But it's different from up here. There aren't nearly as many people in attendance as you thought there were from seeing only those around you. There are pathways around the midway, but whoever laid it out has a couple of dead ends where there's no one at the booths. One ride is shut down for repairs. You see a small boy perhaps standing on his own and crying, a parent strongly scolding a quivering child, a group of roadies standing off to the side of one arcade game while there are lineups at the others that are now left unattended. So the analogy, I think, is clear. When you're down in the trenches, focused on one small area, you're not seeing how it's connected to all the other areas. When all you see is within a 10-meter radius around you, it's impossible to get a comprehensive picture of the whole scene, let alone assess it and drive all the pieces forward to a clear goal that you've set out at the end. So your perspective is warped. One example that I'm reminded of recently is how during the last US election, so many assumed that Trump wouldn't win. Many said after it was because they were only listening to those who agreed with them, those that were right around them. They tuned into only those of a like mind because it was so agreeable. It's like a pleasant picture at the fair when you're only looking at the nice time you're having with those that immediately surround you. Gridlock ensues when you can't see the connections and a clear path out. Highly effective trustees and boards have a strategy. They have a strategic focus and they understand that they aren't there to direct traffic, but rather to govern the whole system with straight lines, I guess more or less, to a definitive end goal. And if not straight lines, then at least winding ones, but with a purpose to take you where you want you to go or where you want the division to go. If you tune into the third webinar, that's going to be in May, I'm talking more about strategic thinking as part of the governance mindset. So developing strategic pathways to get you where you want to go in the end. As Campbell and Fullan suggest in the governance core, a board's job is governing with a strategic context rather than a tactical in the trenches one. It requires a broad systemic view, a view from overhead, or leading out in front and providing direction for those that follow you as the leader. Some trustees confuse the application of monitoring and the role of an individual trustee with that of managing day-to-day administration. Setting a budget, for example, and then proceeding to monitor every single expenditure doesn't work. Or approving and funding a new program stream and then stepping in to implement areas rather than monitoring the outcomes of the program or the outcomes that you have set for that program. Part of the monitoring responsibility is using clear criteria for success. And once you ensure that they are understood, you monitor for achievement. So it's also not just setting out those clear criteria for success, but ensuring that everyone's interpretation of those criteria is in line with what you intended. Where a board's role is connected to strategic thinking and policy, the actual work in these particular areas can be difficult to define. There is a carryover from strategy and policy to the implementation, and it's important that the leadership team, the board and senior administration, that they communicate. But drawing the line between where one ends and the other one starts can perhaps present some difficulties. So working through or interpreting a fundamental policy point or the intended result of a goal in a multi-year strategic plan, it often flows into administrative responsibilities, which then can lead perhaps to board dysfunction. While there are some gray areas, it's prudent not to delve too deep into implementation. Perhaps one way to stay in your lane, which we'll get to in a moment, is when having dialogue or debate on implementation. Approach it by seeking clarity, not presenting your own ideas. So seek to clarify what they have in mind. Seek to find out what's being done and how, rather than providing the specific path for someone to take. Administration is naturally inclined to have to take the path that trustees give them. So be careful of that. The routine work of a board requires many small but essential decisions or actions. They can demand the attention of even the most focused trustee. So it's key to remember that you can't let those small, although essential decisions become the only work of your board. You become then a housekeeping board who is caught up in doing someone else's job, resulting in no one doing the job that you were elected to do as a trustee. A board's job is to act as the driver, the one with the commitment to achieve the vision and mission for the entire division. So Aristotle said, nature abhors a vacuum. The same could be said of leadership. Fullan and Campbell state that a vacuum in leadership may be the most dangerous vacuum of all because of the long-lasting consequences. Trustees have the tools at their disposal to lead. They have the information, possibly the most information. Hopefully they have the best intentions for the division and not an agenda aligned with perhaps a particular special interest. They have the resources and a leadership team to work toward that vision. And they have the experience in and knowledge about the system they are governing. So while trustees are being kept busy being the housekeeping board, then someone or some group will surely step into that vacuum to take the leadership role. I think this is what Aristotle, or if you like, Fullan and Campbell meant. When that vacuum is there, who's stepping in? It's also being aware of someone, and it could be anybody, administration, parent, political supporters, or a special interest, when they are trying to draw you into that housekeeping role and away from the role that you are supposed to be carrying out. So the 4 points that I and the governance core make are developing a clear vision or end goals, work together as a team using a unity of purpose approach. Fullan and Campbell talk a lot about that in their book. Maintain ongoing communication about your intentions and the progress. And by that, I mean just putting some words out there, fancy words about what your intentions are, or are they fully interpreted, or how is someone viewing that? Is it the same as you? Is your communication on the same level? So that, and being mindful of the progress of your goals and not just tuning in at the end to find out it was never as you intended. And then the last part, despite all the other decisions and responsibilities that you must complete, remember that you cannot vacate the position of leadership and the job that goes with it, or someone else will fill the void while you were looking away. Fullan and Campbell speak of unity of purpose, which I mentioned a moment ago. And for this, it needs board cohesion. So yes, there's a focus on strategic thinking and using unity toward a purpose, but that's not to say that you must all be cut from the same cloth and with the same thoughts. I don't think you can do that, and it would be perhaps worrisome if that's what you projected to your public all the time, that there was no discourse or debate about certain issues or items. You have to bring forward those and show your public that all points have been considered. However, there needs to be alignment around goals, policy, and the work of the board. So we're not saying that everyone must conform and fit into a mold. On the contrary, as I said, boards need to be individuals. People bring new ideas and different ways of thinking, different skill sets and strengths, or ways of doing things. And that's why in everyone's code of conduct that I've seen, they talk about being open to what everyone is saying. And perhaps not just open to what they're saying, but are you listening to what they're saying, and are you considering what's being said? So taking into consideration, it's, you know, that old saying where you're looking like you're listening, but in the mind, you're saying, yeah, but. Rather than doing that, it's thinking, how can I make this other person's idea work? And, you know, making sure that you're open to what everyone's saying. But I will say there is always the yeah, but in my own mind. Boards and individual trustees need to check behavior once in a while for impediments that can lead to disconnections. So let's look at that at a bit of a checklist next. On our website under the trustee education, I've posted several other recorded webinars, such as getting your house in order or monitoring and reporting and evaluations. For those under the, I think there's also some under the governance series, but more specifically when it comes to board cohesiveness and impediments that can lead to disconnections, a good annual check can come out of board self-evaluations. Part of an evaluation can look at the what did your board actually do, which is a check on whether the board has accomplished, for example, the goals it set for itself in its, I don't know, maybe your multi-year strategic plan or just other goals. The other part can look at how. Here, the self-evaluation might look at the board's unity of purpose. And some points that they can look at, or some examples that they could be evaluating. The work of the board and whether it's directed at student learning and achievement, or the division's vision and mission. So board level work as opposed to operational work. You know, we have that saying that says, if you are paying someone to do something, don't be doing it yourself. So that operational work that you are paying people to carry out, sure, keep an eye on it and check in to see whether it's happening, but that's not for you to do, not for a trustee to do. You could also check on the board's tendency to confuse accountability and monitoring with micromanagement. You can focus, or the focus of individual trustees on their own ward, single use or single issue or a program, and whether the mandate of learning and achievement for all is suffering. You can evaluate teamwork. Do trustees exhibit a willingness to collaborate, or after losing a vote, to move on to new business in the interest of the whole division? Are they working toward the same goals and issues, or are there silos and factions within the board? It's fine to be offside on a vote, then you come together to work on those ultimate goals that you have set for yourself. Another part of unity of purpose is looking at support for administration. So it's a board's job to set direction for the division, and in its stewardship role, ensure that the board has support and resources to implement that direction. So part of the stewardship role is hiring staff to implement that direction. So why wouldn't the board be supporting the people then that they've hired to do that? However, there is a place for the board to monitor, and if administration is making recommendations that the board doesn't agree with, then of course there is a place for the board to step in. Campbell and Fullan point out that boards mustn't confuse being seen by their public as just a rubber stamp board, that everything that the administration puts forward, they just say, okay. And the difference between that and simply supporting administration for the direction that they, the board, have set in the first place. So ensuring that that's what your public is seeing, that administration is carrying out what you've asked them to do, and that's why you are, you know, approving things. The last point for the unity checklist is the ability to move on after a vote. The outcome of a single vote or issue is not an indicator of board unity. Debate and open discussion are part of the job. And in fact, without that, the board is more at risk of being seen as not doing its job. Rather, a better measure of unity and something to look at in a board self-evaluation may be the board's ability or an individual's ability to move on after losing a vote. So I think it is important for your public to see that points that they have raised with you, perhaps as trustees, are being reflected in the debates and at the board table, but then coming together, and if that side loses, you still move on to other business at hand. Another area I'd like to explore in the governance core and governing with a focus is that of staying in your lane. I started into this a couple of slides ago. If governing at the board level involves things like setting direction, strategic planning, throw those up there, community engagement, decision making, monitoring and evaluation, setting system goals, then the outcomes are handled, implemented, research developed, or whatever by administration. So yes, it is a board's role to take part in those things shown there, but then you are asking your administration to ensure that the outcomes in each of these areas have been taken care of. A simple analogy is that the board is the general contractor and administration the tradespeople. And this is where some issues can arise. So staying in your lane, Campbell and Fullan in the governance core, they look quite fully at the concept of staying in your lane. So as mentioned earlier, they talk about when ensuring there is accountability, not confusing it with micromanaging. You might see it as I'm coming forward and suggesting an option for consideration, but staff can feel under pressure and take it as an explicit direction. Of course, it's not that you can't ever contribute, but consideration should be made for an actual approach. So yes, come forward with ideas, but consider how you approach it. So for example, present the idea at a board meeting for consideration by your peers. Your peers being the operative word and not someone in a position where they feel that they can't turn you down. You may be told at the board table, no, it's not your place to do that, or no, we don't like your idea, but you may be supported. And in this case, it's the board that will give the direction through the proper channels. So maybe the board is having a vote and saying, yes, we want administration to go in this direction. Or they may ask the superintendent or the secretary treasurer to relay that direction on behalf of the board to, say, a transportation supervisor. The direction then can go to, as I said, the superintendent and beyond them, and then senior administration can ask that person to implement the idea on behalf of the board, and it's important that it's not coming from an individual trustee. So it's simple to get your ideas out there and forward. It's just a matter of how you go about doing it. Another approach could be simply asking whether all or other avenues have been considered. So they're thinking about something for, I don't know, something with the staff and their PD. Have you considered this area, or have you considered that area? Or perhaps present other options and ask someone to explore what are the costs and benefits of those. Then administration can look into it and you can make a more informed choice about whether to go ahead. So just remember that the influence of a board member should not be underestimated when you are in a one-on-one situation. Another instance of veering out of your lane is when a board has lost confidence in the superintendent or senior administration. This happens at times often through fear. Fear that directions aren't being carried out, fear that a job isn't well done, fear of alternative objectives on the part of those others. This plays out in constant checking in, micromanaging, and barging into their lane. If, however, you've done your job as a trustee right, through purposeful monitoring, evaluating, through plain communication, checking in from time to time, many of those fears can be allayed. So do a check. Has clear direction been given from the board? I'm sure it's from the board, not the individual trustees. Were goals well spelled out? Were they interpreted correctly, and has administration understood what you are actually looking for? Has the board checked in periodically on the progress and to make sure that administration's interpretation is still as intended, not waiting till the end? Is the method of reporting well done so it's understood by the board, so the reporting coming back from administration? Is it in a manner that the board can actually understand it well and it's clear what the progress is? If it isn't, it's up to the board and trustees to say, have another kick at the can. It needs to be presented in a different way. If the board is worried that a job isn't being well done, take a look at the evaluation that's being done and how any shortfalls are being remedied. If the board has set out certain priorities, ensure that this is where time is being spent and not on alternative objectives, that it is where the board wants the administrative time to be spent. If you see alternative objectives are being acted upon, perhaps before coming back and nailing that point, seek understanding why the time is being spent there. The point made in the governance core is that if the board or individual trustees are veering into the lane of superintendent or senior administration, look at why and figure out how to get back on track through ways that are within the board's purview or area of responsibility. Some trustees come to the table with specific skill sets that can also be related to the work of school division. These might be with a trustee's current professional capacity, maybe attorneys, accountants, HR professionals. It can also be from the past. If a trustee comes from the education field itself, were they a teacher, a principal, or maybe even a previous union rep from within the division? It can be difficult to use that skill set as it relates to the responsibilities of the board, and the temptation can be to move into the lane of the person the division is paying to do that job. Can also take on that role a trustee may also take on that role completely on the board's behalf, not allowing others to join you in the work or give their opinion or other options. You may not be the only one on the board with that particular skill set, so ensure that others are invited in. Or the temptation may be to forget that as a trustee, your allegiance is to the division and not perhaps to the previous role, say as a union rep or a principal, or maybe a chair of a parent advisory council, the PAC. So that's not to say that there aren't some amazing skill sets and wonderful experience that trustees bring and that can truly benefit a board. As a trustee, however, you just have to remember in what capacity you can now make the most use of those attributes. So there's 3 areas next that Fullan and Campbell point out where micromanagement is likely to occur. I'll cover them together as they are related, but yet they have their own identifiers and should be remembered when, again, staying in your lane. Often one of the traits of anyone who becomes a trustee is that they want to help, contribute, volunteer, take on work, and it's often their nature to want to fix things and accomplish tasks. And that can be great for a community. Trustees, just by their very nature, they like to roll up their sleeves. But this isn't setting direction and establishing policy, which is then monitored and evaluated. It's difficult to sit on the sidelines when major initiatives or projects are being implemented. The light often shines on those who do the work, as it's what can be easily seen. But that is your job as a trustee. You can still acknowledge amongst yourselves at the board table the job your board did and that it's being done well. You put, that goal into place. You put something on your strategic plan. And it can also feel good to be the giver of accolades to those that had to roll up their sleeves on the board's behest. So perhaps think of that as your role, the back patter for doing something that you asked to be done. Related to this idea is that governance in and of itself doesn't often provide for immediate rewards. It's often the administrative decisions and work that show short-term results. This is often also the most visible to the community. But good governance is still essential to the overall success of the division. Perhaps a way to make it easier to just ensure that you recognize your peers around the table, even if it's in a quiet way, and that you pat yourselves on the back. And remember, there are no norms or protocols adopted by the board that govern micromanaging. It's not part of the job description. Board operations and policy spell this out. I'm sure if you look at your own policy manual, you will see that in spades. So remember, stick to it, and if in doubt, assess at your annual board evaluation if you are on the right track, if you're micromanaging, or if you're doing your job. Going back to that, what I mentioned at the beginning about leaving a vacuum when you're too busy doing someone else's job and moving into someone else's lane. This last part is related to the previous slide. It addresses the do-gooder. It's fine to help if it's still within the realm of your responsibilities as a trustee, but intervening at the administrative level to solve a problem for constituents may be referred to, or should be referred to, your administration. Trustees are often approached to help a constituent on any number of matters, but assess whether it's in your realm of responsibility. And then, yes, you can be helpful, but consider what help you are giving. Your help should likely come in the form of just educating that person on your role. So it might not be the trustee's role to actually figure that part out, and let them know whose job it is to fix that. And so let them know your role and administration's role, and then you can provide direction so that that person can go directly to the area that they need to, and the issue itself can work itself, through the entire chain of authority. I know that the cliche is we often say it starts with the teacher, and then it might go to the principal, and then it might go to the superintendent or whoever, and goes on up to you for appeal. So think of it in that manner. Think about who it starts with. And of course, if they've been through all of those things, you might want to assess and say, the policy that the board put in place is being followed by your administration. And that's what we set out in quiet times when there wasn't a particular issue. And that policy was put in place to serve all students, the entire division, and not just one particular person. So perhaps using your policy, you might have to just be there to stand up for the administration, and they are carrying out the policy that you set in place for this at that time. Part of the assessment on whether an issue is brought to you by a constituent is in fact for you to, and whether it is in fact for you to solve, can be addressed by thinking of it in these terms. Is it the board that has the authority to act and decide? A trustee, remember, has no authority as an individual member of the board. So if the issue that they're bringing forward, that constituent, is it for the board to decide? Because you, as we said, have no ability to decide. So always being careful what you promise as well. Saying, I'll look after that for you. Be very careful, it's only the board that can give the directive. So you have rights and responsibilities as a trustee, but it is the collective authority of the board that can take action and make a decision. So I'm going to flip over to this last part here, and I'll just remind you that we're on to the last slide already. If you do have a question that you want to, I do see one question that's come up there. If you do have another question that you want to add in there over on the left side, do so within this last couple of minutes. I'll end here, and as I said, go to questions in a minute. So this is the first of this three-part series. It was just going to be a quick one, and it takes snapshots of the governance core that's referred to in the top left corner. You'll see there, and with the names of the authors. If you're joining us live for the next two webinars, one in April and one in May, or for the recorded webinars, look at the Manitoba School Board's website, seen here in blue, and under the top tab Services, click on the drop-down menu and you'll look for Trustee Education. I believe it's the third one. And then on the left side, you'll see a link to the online learning page, and you can access all the webinars from there. I referred to a couple of them earlier today. There are other good governance resources on our website too. You can find some of them also under that Services tab, and at the top of our homepage. You again look for Trustee Education in the drop-down menu, but there's also the yellow Resources tab. So if you take a look there. And with that, you can keep typing questions while I answer this one, or comments if you like, just in the page there while you read through on this screen too. Okay, so I'll address one of the questions there now. It says, from the beginning, can you expand on the board setting strategy and administration implementing it? There's crossover. Yes, there certainly is crossover. So, and yes, that's a good example there. Or one would be, for example, the board is responsible for the development of the division's multi-year strategic plan. Of course, there's input from administration, but in the end, remember, it is the board's plan and the board who is responsible for the ultimate outcomes. But within the plan, the board must set out clear goals, SMART goals. I hope that most of you have heard of those and you know them as specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So from this, administration will set its own operations plan. Sometimes it's called an action plan, a work plan, whatever you like. But that's to assist the board in completing its own goals. And remember, your multi-year strategic plan, that is the board's plan. The board develops it, designs it, owns it. Certainly you can take it input from administration, but administration does not develop it and then just pass it by for approval. So providing future focused learning experiences, that might be one example. So the board might say, we want to see improved credit acquisition or improved participation rates in programs that are designated to be innovative, ones that are future focused. So then it would be up to administration to develop a parallel plan for programming that provides for additional credits and to designate certain programs or courses that are innovative and track participation in those areas. The board can then look at the reports that tell them whether what they set out is actually being accomplished. So they asked for those things to be done. Administration resourced how that can happen and researched it, put it into place. But then you should have criteria to know, was our goal, was our strategy for this, for the future focused learning experiences, was it successful? The first part, the direction, is given by the board, and as I said, administration researches it, they come up with ways to do it, they implement it, and they report back to the board so that the board can evaluate it. So that's it in a nutshell. Very simplistic. I know it's not always so easy in practice, but it's the general sense and in the time frame that we have here now. So the board really sets direction, develops some strategies, and administration implements. And they do it, they work in concert, but there are particular roles for each. So I've got one other question here. It's going to come up in a color that I can't read very well. It just says the next webinar, April 8th. Yes, it's going to be at noon as well. We have experimented, or I have experimented with running webinars at all different times of day, in the morning before work starts, after work finishes, at lunchtime, so people can tune in then. And I've tried different days, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. This seems to be the time that is most well attended, but as I always say, if you do miss a webinar. We do put all of them up on our website in the trustee education section. You don't have the obvious advantage of being able to pose questions right then and there, but if you listen to the recording and have something after, you can always tune in and or you can always give me a call at the office or email me as well. So my email is down there at the bottom in red. All right, I hope you found this of some interest and maybe some of the ideas in the governance core that I presented here today have piqued your interest. As I said, you can always go and check out the book in full. Maybe you'll be the one bringing forward some ideas for the rest of your board. So thanks so much for joining me today, and look forward to perhaps seeing you on here the next time. One quick thing, each webinar has a unique link. So just drop me an email, maybe closer to the date, April 8th, we'll be sending out a notice in divisional mail and you'll see it then. Thanks, bye.